Just to set the stage for what we're going to be talking about, here's the trailer from the movie The Master. You'll see the self-improvement kind of cult leader telling his followers the one thing that we humans most want to know, which is that we're not animals and that we're not going to die. So he tells them that he's discovered the secret to living in these bodies that we currently inhabit, but that our real place in the hierarchy of evolution or creation is far above the other animals. In other words, he's discovered the secret of immortality.
Man is not an animal. We are not a part of the animal kingdom. We sit far above that crowd,
You must understand.
perched as spirits, not beasts.
I have unlocked and discovered a secret to living in these bodies that we hold.
Good science allows for more than one opinion. Otherwise, you merely have the will of one man, which is the basis of a cult.
The French novelist Albert Camus wrote that man is the only creature who doesn't want to be what he is. And that thing that we don't want to be is an animal. So what I'd like to talk about here is that in order to pretend to ourselves that we're not animals, we try to separate ourselves and distance ourselves from all the other animals and the whole world of nature. The consequences of this are devastating for them and for us and for the whole planet. And incidentally, I'm assuming for the purposes of this talk that we're all aware that the situation for animals everywhere is going from bad to worse as each day passes. Scientists tell us that we're already well into a sixth great extinction of species that's unfolding more rapidly than any of the previous five, like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs and 75% of all life on the planet 65 million years ago. Well, you'd think that with more animal protection groups and environmental organizations than ever before, things would be getting better in at least some areas. But no. On top of what we're doing to the wildlife, to the atmosphere, and the climate, and the oceans, and the forests, there's also more factory farming than ever before, more vivisection, more animals in entertainment, and so on. Why then do we humans, who are supposedly a highly intelligent species, continue down a track that's bringing on mass extinction, an extinction event that will quite possibly include ourselves as well? Why do we so desperately not want to be animals? Why do we need to feel superior to nature, exceptional, more highly evolved, and above it all? A good place to start is the 1973 Pulitzer Prize-winning book by anthropologist Ernest Becker called The Denial of Death. Becker pulled together strands from some of the best work in the fields of psychology, philosophy, and theology to come up with his central thesis, that at the core of the human condition is our terror of our own animal nature, and our constant anxiety over the fact that as animals we're going to die. The other animals certainly have moments of terror when faced with the immediacy of death. But the rest of the time they just get on with their lives, mostly in a peaceable and content way. For us humans, it's very different. We spend our entire lives trying to avoid our inevitable fate. That's because the one thing that makes us different from all the other animals, at least as far as we know, is that we have developed a level of self-awareness that enables us to spend much of our time reflecting on our past and our future. And when we imagine our future and we look ahead, we see the one inevitable, unstoppable event toward which we are progressing, our death. Becker wrote about our dual nature, our animal self, and what he called our symbolic self. He wrote, "Man is a symbolic self, a creator with a mind that soars out to speculate about atoms and infinity. This immense expansion, this dexterity, this ethereality, this self-consciousness gives to man literally the status of a small god in nature. Yet, at the same time, man is a worm, and food for worms. This is the paradox. He is out of nature and hopelessly in it. He has an awareness of his own splendid uniqueness in that he sticks out of nature with a towering majesty. And yet he goes back into the ground a few feet, in order blindly and dumbly to rot and disappear forever. So, how do we relate to being haunted by the spectre of death? Very simply, we deny it. We tell ourselves that one way or another we're not going to die, that we're not animals like the other animals, and we spend our whole lives trying to make this true. What Becker wrote about has given rise to an entire field of psychology called terror management theory, all about the many different ways we try to manage our terror and avoid our inevitable fate. One of those immortality projects, for example, as psychologists call them, is to spend your life creating a legacy, like a family business, or trying to shape your children so that you can live on through them, or creating a work of art or a building that will at least carry on your name for generations to come. Or you can go on a quest for the elixir of life, as ancient Chinese emperors did, and as people do today in the life extension movement, looking for magical potions or medical breakthroughs or post-human technologies that will enable you to upload your brain to a computer that will hopefully never crash. Or you can tell yourself, like the character in that movie clip, that the real you is separate from your body and will somehow live on. That, of course, is the staple product of most religions. Religions are in the business of selling us immortality, and they tell you in their various ways that you're not really an animal, you're a soul that's simply inhabiting a body. And when that animal body dies, the soul goes somewhere else, perhaps to heaven, perhaps to a new body or another planet, or wherever. Western religious thought, in fact the whole of Western civilization, is founded largely on the denial of death. In ancient Greece, Aristotle argued that the divine intellect which distinguishes man from the animals is immortal and transcendent. And Augustine persuaded Christians that in heaven there will be no animal body to weigh down the soul in its process of corruption. In other words, spirituality has become equated with separation from nature, and therefore separation from our own true nature. I would argue that trying to separate ourselves from our fellow animals is not really spirituality at all, and that this kind of upside-down thinking has been devastating to our fellow animals because it leads us to treat them as soulless commodities that exist largely for our own convenience. By the 17th century, the Catholic philosopher and theologian René Descartes had taken the most alarming step yet in separating humans from our fellow animals. He asserted that animals are nothing more than biological machines, whose shrieks of pain when he would nail them down to his vivisection table meant nothing more than the sound of a squeaky door hinge. Most religious doctrine still follows that view one way or another. So, in fact, does much of the scientific community, especially the vivisection industry. And religions still tell us that heaven is a place from which all non-humans are excluded, except perhaps for pets, since people with pets like to imagine that Fido and Fluffy can get a special exemption that doesn't apply to other animals. After all, we don't like to think of the lobster on our dinner plate as having just gone to heaven while she was being boiled alive. Ultimately, the biggest immortality project of all is civilization itself, with its fundamental belief that we humans are progressing towards some utopian future. And most utopian futures include the idea of rising above our animal nature and becoming some kind of immortal superbeings. The more we tell ourselves that we humans are exceptional and superior, the worse it gets for all the other animals. They are, after all, a continuing reminder of who and what we really are, which only makes our need to demonstrate our own superiority even more urgent. Another problem you have if you're invested in any belief system that's promising to be the way to immortality, whether it's Christianity or Islam, or capitalism or communism, or posthumanism, or whatever, is that whichever one you're counting on is inevitably threatened by the others. If Christianity and Islam, for example, are each saying that their system is the only way to eternal life, then you've got a problem. Same thing if communism and capitalism are both promising heaven on earth. They can't both be true. And so to keep shoring up whichever one you're invested in, you have to try to eliminate the ones you're feeling threatened by. And that's how the bigger religious, political, and economic systems usually end up fighting each other and demonizing each other. And one of the best ways of demonizing each other is to tell ourselves that it's those people over there who are the animals. Think of how the Nazis, in their quest to become superhuman and to build an immortal Third Reich that would last for at least 1,000 years, had to project their own animal nature onto Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and other outgroups, portraying them as subhuman. They're the animals, the rats, the vermin. And now, check out the incredible irony in this next video, where the grandchildren of the very people who were being treated as animals by the Nazis now have their own nation and are talking about the people that they're now oppressing as being the animals. This is a scene at a West Bank checkpoint, and you'll see two young Israeli guards in a home video at the end laughing as they tell their friends that we're the humans and they're the animals.
שוברים אותו. מה זה שוברים אותו? מבחינת נותנים לי לסבול. מתחת לשמש, מתחת לגשם. העיקר שילמד לא להתעסק עם מג"ב.
כולה חליפה. על הארץ, על הארץ. כול אישי על הארץ. כן?
מכתוב סכן פיקלין. רוחי אילה קליל, סכן פיקלין. מכתוב סכן פיקלין, רוחי אילה קליל.
תסתכל מה עושים לנו מהילדים, מה עושים. תסתכלו.
Nobody knows about us here. Nobody. Nobody.
שקט.
שומעים אותי גם?
איפה אתם?
יופי.
מה רוצים לצלם פה?
חיות, דיסקאברי. כל רמאללה זה ג'ונגל, יש שם קופים, כלבים, גורילות. הבעיה שהחיות עכשיו סגורות שם, הם לא יוצאות. מה? לא, אנחנו בני אדם, הם חיות. להם אין צלם אנוש, לנו יש. זה ההבדל בין... בואנה! מה? תצלם, אכפת לי, אני חשבן, למישהו נראה לך. אני גם הרמטכ"ל יהיה.
And so it goes. No wonder then that the whole situation for us, and as a result for all the other animals, is such a mess. So, is there any way out of this? Well, with all the time and energy we spend trying to prove that we're not animals, and with all the terrible destruction we're wreaking on the planet as a result, you have to wonder if there's a way of accepting that we are animals, and of making peace then with our fellow animals. But there's certainly no sign of that at the moment. Nor have the psychologists who work in the field of terror management theory come up with a solution to the anxiety and terror we feel in relation to our own mortal animal nature. At the end of his book, The Denial of Death, Ernest Becker wrote, "There is no way to overcome creaturely anxiety unless one is a god and not a creature." And he wrote, rather gloomily, that men are doomed to live in an overwhelmingly tragic and demonic world, and that whatever man does on this planet has to be done in the lived truth of the terror of creation, of the grotesque, of the rumble of panic underneath everything, otherwise it is false. And he concluded, ideally, we would wait in a condition of openness, awe-filled creatures trying to live in harmony with the rest of creation. That, of course, would be the absolute opposite of how our species lives its life today. The whole human condition, with all its anxieties and aggressions and frustrations and lack of fulfillment, stems from our need to tell ourselves that I am not an animal. But if we can't resolve our inner anxieties by plumbing the depths of our very human minds to try to overcome our fear of being an animal, there is another way round, a better way round in fact, and that is to make the conscious, deliberate decision to change our behavior toward the other animals. Albert Einstein once called upon us to do just that. He said that our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by extending our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. He said that when we do that, we find that we are no longer alone, but that our own small lives are part of a much greater life, and that by giving to that greater life, the fear, the loneliness and anxieties associated with our sense of mortality can begin to melt away. In a chaotic, destructive world of 9 billion people, that's a bit of a tall order. But it is certainly the one thing, the one truly meaningful thing, that any of us can do, individually or together, to make our peace with our fellow animals. And, not surprisingly, it's the one thing that all the great sages throughout history have always told us, which is to treat others, all others, with the kind of respect we'd want to be treated with in their place. That, certainly, is within our power. You may not be able to change the world or save the world, and frankly that would just be more human hubris and arrogance anyway. But to treat other animals, including other human animals, as you'd want to be treated, is something any of us can do. It's hardly a new idea, but it is the one timeless philosophy of life that we've all been told and that we all know. And what it also tells us is that when we stop hurting the animals around us, we also stop hurting the animal within us. When we make peace with the animals around us, we make peace with the animal within us too. So that's the start of a healing, and it can open the door to a new and a more meaningful relationship with the rest of creation and our place as part of it. I'm Michael Mountain.